Welcome back to the desert, where we gather around the well that is Jesus, both for conversation, but also to drink deeply from the good news that is his life, his death, and his resurrection. Wherever it is that you're listening today, we are glad to have you with us. Happy that you have taken time, that you have made time to be here. And we hope truly that this might help you as you follow Jesus, as you drink from his well, as you gather with us too. So we are glad that you are here. Today, we are going to be continuing, if you will, from our last podcast where we talked about discipleship, broadly speaking. So what is it? What is it not? All those sort of things we talked about last week. A quick shout out to Miss Becca Blessing for the critique, or the suggestion, maybe is a better way to say it, that we shouldn't have these long intros without saying what we're going to talk about. So no questions yet, Derek.
She'll be very excited to hear the shout out.
And at least this way now, if you don't like what we're going to talk about, I guess you can turn it off at this point. So we're going to talk about individual discipleship. Or said in another way, you're one person. How do you follow Jesus? And so that's what we're going to talk about, but I think we should do a quick rewind. Derek, what's sort of one thing you want to recap before we dive in today?
So last week we talked about discipleship in general, right? And what that means, what our role is as followers of Christ, and what does discipleship look like? What does it look like in the church? What does it look like in our own personal lives? And so, I think that last week when we touched base on the role of the church, right? I was thinking about this, like the church is the body, right, of believers. It's not the building. Mm-hmm. And we can rely on others and utilize others to help us in our discipleship journey. And I don't know if that's something that we touched base on necessarily in that verbiage last week, but as I was listening and kind of rehashing some of the things that we talked about last week, that was one thing that stuck out. And I was like, maybe we should have talked about that maybe a little bit more in depth. There's more about the people and not necessarily the building. Because the building is where you go, but the resources are ultimately the people.
And, one of the biggest sort of misspeaks sometimes is that, hey, you're going to church today. No, you're going to worship because you are the church. And so in some ways, we're talking about what does it mean to be the church, or what does it mean to be a part of the church? And one of those things is discipleship. So one of the things I want to remind us before we go further is that discipleship is very big and very broad. I hope that as you listened last week, you heard us really explode, if you will, or at least expand your horizons of, hey, it's not just I got to sit down and read my Bible. It's not just I got to pray. Those are certainly parts of it. You'll talk about that today, but that it's much more than that too. So let's dive right in. I think our hope is to just have a conversation because, you just said it perfectly, leading us in that we can learn from each other, that, we're to build each other up is the language Paul uses, that we're to bear each other's burdens, all those sort of things, that you have valuable insights, Derek, that I could grow from, and vice versa as well. And so Absolutely. We think that applies to our listeners as well, that, hey, even if you're listening to this, we can learn with you, from you as well. So our hope is that maybe as we talk about how we do this, what our practices are, what our rhythms are, I think is a good word for that. Then some of our struggles too, that will help you and help all of us then follow Jesus as his disciples together. So first question I think we should wrestle with is why. So when you think about like your own personal discipleship, why do you find it important? And why do you seek to do it? I think that's good. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So
okay, cool.
In the last 3 episodes, we've started with you asking me a question.
That's right. But do you want to ask me a question first?
Well, I think,
or should I answer it first?
Why don't you answer this one first?
Okay. That's good. Right. We should not do the same thing over and over again. So I think for me, they're sort of twofold. So as a pastor, it's a struggle sometimes to try and do this weird and impossible thing of separating spiritual things for work and spiritual things for self. Mm-hmm. And so part of my why I read the Bible, why I pray, is the simple thing that part of it is my job, right? It is my job to be a praying person. I made that commitment and promise to God, to this place, to do that. But that would be, to me, a very shallow first reason. But I think a lot of people would say, well, of course, that's your reason why you do this. To me, though, one of the reasons I practice, and probably the deepest reason for me, is that my routines, my rhythms help give me the meaning for my daily life. And what I mean by that is the ways in which I do things help create structure, help create purpose, help create a sense of meaning in regular, ordinary daily life. So because not every day is glamorous, or you know this, I mean, just as well as anybody else does, that life is not always sunshine, rainbows. Life is not always a mountaintop experience. And a lot of times we really just live life either in between a valley or in between a mountain peak, and we're just kind of there. And so for me, why I do those is because they are, you could use the word centering, if you will, if you wanted to, but they are just foundational to my life.
Yeah, and it keeps you grounded, right? In your typical normal routine, and there's often peace and comfort within the routine itself, right?
Not even just like the spiritual side of it. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's obviously the spiritual benefits, right? Of when I'm praying to the God who's in control, I'm reading what his word says about me and the world around me. But it's also just, hey, it doesn't matter. I've got this time with Jesus. It doesn't matter. I'm going to do this thing no matter what. Mm-hmm. And that alone, the practice of a repetitive thing is enough to do that and bring that peace.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and for me, I'm less structured, probably. What I do, I mean, I do have structure, of course. The first thing I do when I get to my office every day is I pick one of the devotionals that I have so that I can spend a little bit of time in the Word. The devotionals that I have are typically centered around either Lutheran education or leadership, or, you know, one of my favorites is like the daily strength one, right? Centered around what does it mean to be just a guy, right?
Sure.
Some things that we face. So I always start my day with something like that first. And then after I finish my devotion, I say a prayer. Right. And then that is all done before we go into our staff devotions and everything. And then throughout the day, right, it just kind of depends on the day to day. But I would say that there's one thing that I think we often overlook is just how much time we spend in prayer throughout the day too. I try to have kind of a continual prayer going all the time. And
what does that look like for you? So, I mean, I think I want to go back to the why question eventually too. So why do you do all this? But what does that look like for you? Because I've heard people say that, and, you know, for me, it's always like my mind is way too cluttered and I have way too many things in my head to even think about doing something like that. So how does that sound, or how does that, if I was listening to this, how would you explain it to me?
It is the voice in my head talking consistently with intent, though, right? So I'm one that I do live in my head a lot, right? I talk to myself a lot.
Sure.
Continually having conversations. You know, if we do this, could be the case. If we do this, this could be the case. You know, how should I respond to X, Y, Z, right? But in those conversations in my head, I'm also trying to find wisdom and discernment. And the best place for me to do that is to say just a simple prayer like, Lord, What would you have me do in this situation? Give me the words, give me the insight. And so I would say that it's not like a long drawn out thing, but it's just like, it's not your typical, dear God, please give me this, or please allow me this, or help me with this, right? It's more like, Lord, I need you right now. Give me something to help me, right?
Sure.
So very less structured in that aspect of it.
And so it's less of the formal, more of a companion, like a turning to the partner that's next to you sort of thing. Hey, I need your help here. Like I know I'm not alone, but can you do something sort of thing?
Right.
And I think that's more, I don't know, I can understand and relate to that more than like the idea of I'm constantly praying in my head. Well, how do you ever have a conversation? Like, are you able to split your mind in half? I can't do that. I'm not insane. I can't have split personalities at the same time. So I think that's helpful to think about it in a sort of realizing every situation is a time and a moment to ask for help, for guidance, for direction, for seeking God's will. So let's go back. But why does Derek do this? So Jared does this for structure and routine a lot, and creates the sort of rhythms that help give me purpose, all those sort of things. But why does Derek do this sort of stuff? I think I've already heard a few things, but tell us more.
The big one for me is that that's where I find my peace. And when life gets stressful, hectic, whatever, that is my grounding, is the conversation of the prayer with God is the thing that does bring me peace. And oftentimes I will find that that when I ask for specific things and say, Lord, remove this stress, or help me not to be anxious about whatever it might be, that within a few minutes, not always, but oftentimes that peace is provided, right?
Sure.
And that's gone back until, I can remember I used to mow this yard growing up, and there was this is a little off topic, but not completely. And there was like this stretch of yard where it was just scary. And I don't know why it was ever
like
scary.
Big trees or shade, or like
I don't even
like gonna fall off the mower. Like,
I don't even know what it was, but I always just felt like, hey, when I'm walking through this part or mowing through this part of that yard, I got to say a prayer. And I had no idea why, but that's one memory that I have of like where that continual conversation with God kind of started. So yeah, it brings me peace. That's my why.
And I think then you can play that out for how we practice. So that's where I think we should go next. Like what do we actually do? Because most often we just kind of do things, but I think if we stop to ask the why, we can kind of understand the different things we do and the different ways in which we practice it. Because when we do it, we're trying to fill that why bucket, right? Even it's one of those things that some people say, well, you don't have to ask the question why, or okay, that's just you, pastor. But I would say to you that whether you've intentionally thought about why you do this stuff or not, you still have a why. There's still a reason you're doing what you're doing, whether you necessarily have thought about it, wrote it down, et cetera, et cetera. It is still there. It's still functioning and operating as part of your frame of mind or your mindset, if you will. For me, I'll go first here. Broadly speaking, would be a normal day in my life when I'm thinking about discipleship. So I wake up in the morning, and we should say this too. So this is not meant to be like, look at me, what I do, right? This is not wow, pastor, you're such a spiritual person, and I would encourage you. I'll tell you why you shouldn't think that after I'm done. but please don't hear that at all.
Yeah, nothing that we're saying today is anything that we are prescribing that you could or ought to do. It's just simply, these are what we do in our own discipleship.
And I love to hear what other people do, because I love ideas and I love new things. So anyway, when I wake up, usually there's two options, right? I'm either going to run or I'm going to not, basically. And either way, I try and turn on, so I have my headphones, I try and turn on, it's called the Commuter Bible. It's a podcast, this Christian Standard Bible, read through the Bible in a year, and I think some of the Psalms and Proverbs more than once. And so it's usually about 20-ish minutes, and I just have that on, listening to it as I'm either running right away or as I'm making breakfast. And on good days, I forget what the book was called. Habits of the Household, I think, is the book that I got this idea from. On my good days, I will stop and say a prayer and say, all right, I've woken up first. God, give me a good day. Help me look to you first. So then I'll listen to my Bible, make my breakfast. When I'm done with that, assuming that I'm still running at that point, I will either listen to like a leadership Bible. I'll listen to my Bitcoin podcast I like to listen to. And then again, on good days, I'll stop and try and pray while I'm running, because when I don't run, I have more time at the table to pray. And so I have a prayer list on my Bible reading app that has certain people assigned to certain days. And so I pray for all those people on a very regular basis after I'm done eating, after I'm done reading. So my wife and I, Emily and I, try and read the same scripture passage every day. And so it's a great way for us to hold each other accountable, us to sort of live together in the Word at the same time, even though we're not having like hour-long conversations about this. It's not as though we sit there and have devotional talk in the morning. It's just a way for us to be on the same page, to connect. And so we read the same scripture, I'll pray, and then by that time, usually the kids are up, right? And so from there, it's just kind of going into the day. When I get to the office here, when I get to church, if school is in session, usually I basically get here and then run to teacher devotions with the staff. And so that's as much of a being fed thing than it is a doing, for me at least. I go to sort of be present as pastor, as leader in that way, but I also go because every morning when we're there, we pray, and there's a short little something for us. So it's a way for me to receive in that time. And then from there, it's coming back after I usually play with the kids when school's in session, back into my office. And if I don't have something, I will sit and read. So I like to try and read for 15 minutes a day. Mm-hmm. And because you can read a lot if you read for 15 minutes a day, even though it's very small, you can read a lot over the course of a year. And so I'll try and read something. Right now I'm reading Holy Conversations, a strategic planning book. And then I try and pray. And so I try, and you're noticing words like on good days, try.
It's not all the same.
Right. And so on good days, I will then pray for the people and the concerns of the church, right? And so we just had a member who lost a husband, and so I will pray for them today. And then throughout the rest of the day, I don't know. I don't have that same sort of prayer thing like you do, but I do a lot of praying, when I'm calling people, when I'm checking in on them, I pray a lot during the day. And one of the things that has really helped me in that is to realize that I am truly participating in that, because it can become just a task, right? Yep. Like it can become I got to call this lady and pray for her because she's going through something hard. And you can do that when you do it all day, multiple times a day, you can do it at a very arm's length, distant sort of way, disconnected from it. And so I try on my good days to really be present in that, and to see that is truly a discipleship moment for me as an individual too, not just as pastor for that person.
Yeah.
And so that's through the day. And then, I mean, at night, it's dinner prayers with the kids. We'll talk next week. We'll talk about family in a narrow and a broad sense, right? Not just, your nuclear family, but bigger, your church family too. But then, it's just kind of hanging out, going to sleep. Emily and I pray together every night right before bed. And it's usually something like, thanks for this day. Amen. And that's kind of it. I'll throw it to you. Is there any questions you have as you hear what I've said? Anything you think I should elaborate on before I sort of say, hey, here's a thing that I think I struggle with in...
Yeah. So one thing that I often wonder, right, with my father-in-law being a pastor, you being a pastor, right, I've got a lot of friends who are pastors also, is that's always something that your own spiritual connection with Jesus, your own walk, how do you separate that from your work? And when you're talking through, right, this is a task that I have to do because it's my job, right?
Right.
How do you balance those? And do you find yourself struggling to balance those sometimes? Or is it relatively easier now, year 5 for you as a pastor? Is it relatively easy now to be more present and it's not a task?
Or you just, 5 years in, you're just so spiritually dead that you don't even remember what it was like. And I mean, and joking aside, like that is a very real reality for a lot of pastors. I mean, you look at burnout rates and wanting to retire. I forget what the stat was, but sometime in COVID, it was some astronomical number of pastors thought about leaving the ministry. And I think I'll refer back to last week when we talked about vocation. We were talking about Judah's baptism. Mm-hmm. So I think you would find people on both sides of the spectrum, ones who would say you have to do your own sort of spiritual health and wellness, and that then you have to do that separately. And I think I can appreciate that. I think in some ways that's probably somewhat right, but I don't think it's that simple. And so it's sort of I'm not one person, right? Or I'm not two different people, right? I don't just wear one hat. I wear a whole bunch of hats all at the same time. And so for me, I think it's trying to answer a different question. And that's the question more is, how is my relationship, right? Because if my relationship with Jesus is good as well, and for me, that usually means, am I doing my practices? Am I doing my rhythms? Then if I am, things are probably good. That will help me not really deal with that question, because I'll be fine because I'm doing the thing. So I'm reading, I'm praying, I'm spending time just being there, and that will help me in those moments. But the difficult moments come when there's a lot of giving. And it comes back to that same question. Is my relationship good? As long as my relationship is getting poured into, right? As long as I'm sort of filling my cup, doesn't matter if it's here or at home or somewhere else, then it doesn't matter necessarily how much I'm pouring out. But if that pouring out becomes more than what's getting poured into me, then I don't have enough to give, And so there's a few times, I think, in the last years where, I'm in tears because I feel helpless. I don't know how to help. I feel inadequate for the task. I feel like I don't have anything left to give. It's the whole, people look to the pastor to be the strong one, whether it's on the dying bedside of somebody,
right,
or just someone who's really struggling. And you want to be that for them. But at the same time, you can't save that person. And what your role in that moment is almost not to be the strong one. In some ways, it's to get out of the way and let Jesus come. So that's a really long answer, but I mean, I think I would say I've learned that it's not as simple as trying to separate me time versus work time, because then it's like, yeah, it's not reality. I think so.
Yeah. Well, and one reason that I ask that question is because oftentimes if one person has a question, others do too.
Sure.
And when I see either you up there preaching or my father-in-law or whoever the pastor might be, it's always something that I think about because I get a little bit of the taste of that in my role.
Yeah, absolutely you do.
I am called to be a spiritual leader here at the school for the teachers who then are spiritual leaders for the students. And the why for me also goes back to I need to do this so that I can, as you said, pour into others. And so I get a little bit of that differentiating the task, the why, but also.
So then how do you do it? What does that look? What does that mean for you?
Well, mine is I would say vastly different than yours. Meaning my spiritual leadership is probably on a much, I don't know if this is the right term, but smaller scale.
I would disagree, but that's okay. You have big impact,
like I said, maybe that wasn't the
massive impact.
I'm not talking about like scale in that way, right?
Sure.
I'm talking more scale of I'm not having these conversations with people about death. I'm not having those bedside conversations with people. Most of mine revolve around the classroom. Teaching might be something theological that I can answer for a teacher.
Sure. I mean, parents,
Yep.
The difficult situations with kids, with their parents. I mean, it's supporting them, helping them see that spiritually too.
Yeah, for sure. And so I do get a little bit of the taste of what you have and other pastors have, but it is different. For sure.
So then what is it? Do you find that you try and separate things then? Or is it you sort of just do and trying to get that bucket filled? I mean, what's the distinction for you?
I think like you, it's so intertwined in everything that I do anyways, that it's just become second nature.
Sure.
So when I open up my devotion every morning, right? Some mornings there are times where I read the entire devotion. I'm like, what did that just say? Let's go back, read it again.
Yeah. Good for you.
And there are
I would
times
just move
where
on and say like, that was not good enough right, and I'll do the next one. Skip that one.
Yeah, sure. And one of the devotions I've read through 3-4 times, and it's kind of nice going back to some of those other devotions. But anyways, so yeah, and the different books, right? If I'm looking for something specific to help me with something specific, right? I'll change up my devotions because again, if I've got a leadership question, well, I'm going to go to my devotional about leadership. If I have something about Lutheran education or being a leader in a private Christian school, I'm going to go to that devotion, right? Gather wisdom from somebody who's been there before.
Sure. So then let's talk about your habits and routines. So we got the sort of, when I come to work, here's the things I do. Here's my prayer throughout the day. What is there anything else during work? But what about before and after? What does Derek do there?
So during the day, it's constant prayer and things, and it depends on my week and what is going on. I'm going to spend probably more time in the Word preparing for chapel, making sure that my knowledge, my theology, what I'm going to be presenting to the students, to the staff, to everybody present is sound, right?
Sure.
Prayer also is involved in that. Anytime I speak publicly, especially in chapel, one of my prayers is kind of get me out of the way, Lord, this is you type of thing, right? I am but the vessel that you are choosing to use in this very moment. But on the normal day, it's changed a little bit since Malachi has been born and since he has gone to daycare. I've got a 45-minute drive where I can really focus my time in learning new things. And one of those things that I really enjoy is listening to podcasts about Lutheran theology, Lutheran education, the Lutheran world. It doesn't have to be Lutheran, right? But filling my own spiritual bucket in that sense has been nice, because with a 45-minute drive, there's not much else to do other than to pay attention to the road and listen.
Right.
So that's been nice. It's been different over the summer. Haven't had that ability to. But then in the evenings, Beck and I, we always pray before we eat. We say the same prayer every time. And now that Malachi is actually eating people food, we can sit around the table, right? He's in his high chair. We hold hands. We say the common table prayer, the extended version. I don't know if you know the extended version.
I've heard it.
Yeah.
But I haven't yet adopted it, so I don't know what people will think about me if they know that.
And then Becca's family, when I met Becca, and one of the first times I ate dinner over there, they started praying and saying, "Come, Lord Jesus, be our guest." And then they continued on, and I was like, what is this? So I've learned.
Are you a Lutheran? Are you a real Lutheran?
I've learned over time. And so we end it, and may there be a goodly share on every table everywhere, and may we help to put it there.
Sure.
Right. So it kind of puts that servant aspect on us. But anyways, so we pray together before we eat, and then before we go to bed. That's one thing that we do too, is when we're putting Malachi down for bed, we say a prayer, the three of us together, and we take turns.
Sure.
So she does it one night, I do it the next night. Some nights it's just simply the Lord's Prayer. Right? Because we're tired. Yeah. It's not that we don't want to pray.
Not that it's less than right. I mean, Come on. Jesus says, pray like this. Like, it's a good prayer.
Absolutely. And then I find fulfillment in Christian music too. And I know that there's a lot of Christian contemporary songs that are not theologically sound, but there are a lot that are too.
It's gotten a lot better.
Yeah. Yes, for sure. So yeah, that's kind of what my day looks like. And then I always try to fall asleep praying. And when Beck and I first got married, she said, I kind of told her that. And I said, well, again, it comes to a peace and comfort thing for me. Is I know that I've been filled enough to that point where if I don't end my prayer and I fall asleep, that to me, that's a good thing, because it means that my conversation with God was soothing enough that I could fall asleep.
That's so different than how I think most people are like, oh, I'm trying so hard to stay awake and pray at the end of the day. I keep falling asleep though. Geez, I like that. So I'm curious more about that. Like, is it just kind of not rambling? That's not a charitable way to say it, but like, you're just kind of like talking and you just in your head keep going until you fall asleep? Like, is that simple?
Yeah, typically. And sometimes I find myself, like wandering off, and then I come back and I say, sorry, God. I started thinking about, this, that, or the other thing, and not what I was intentionally praying for. But I kind of figured that my prayer should be a conversation with a friend.
Sure.
And that's kind of how I operate, especially the one at nighttime, is, all right, let's unwind here. Let's unpack this, cast my burdens to Jesus, and allow him to carry those, because one, we're called to do that, but two, we can't carry those burdens on our own. And I think for me personally, that has been very helpful. I've found myself falling asleep less praying lately after Malachi, just because life is very different. right?
Yeah.
But anyways, that's kind of my day to day. Yeah.
So what would you say is the hardest or the most difficult part of discipleship for you? Like, what's the stumbling block? Might be too big a word, like not in the sense of causing you to sin, but what is the biggest thing that gets in the way for you when you think about discipleship, following Jesus, practices, rhythms, stuff like that?
It's something that we've already touched base on in one of the other episodes, right? All the other things of the world tend to be more shiny, right? And picking up this and sitting down and reading this is not always the overly exciting thing. And so I try to find ways that I can work around that, right? Instead of just opening up the Bible, right? How can I be in the Word in other ways of just reading it? And so I do watch a lot of YouTube, watch a lot of theological things, whether it's historical, theology, the archaeology side of things. I love the history side. So I try to be filled spiritually through those things too. And through that, be in the Word in various aspects. But that's my biggest challenge is, when you were saying that you're listening to the Bible for a year, Beck and I, we've tried to sit down and read the Bible front to back together multiple times. And both of us, we've probably read the entire Bible multiple times without knowing it, but front to back, I know I've never started it from the beginning and finished it at the end in one entire sitting. Right.
Well, and I would never recommend anyone to do it that way ever.
It's tough.
And just in case you have this mindset, like I am just literally slogging through, Deuteronomy and Leviticus.
Oh,
it
you
usually
get all
takes
those. Oh.
It's like you take an Old Testament and a New Testament and sometimes a Psalm or a proverb, and that's like what I'm listening to. So like right now, we're actually listening to Luke, the Gospel of Luke, paired with Ecclesiastes. And so it's not just a symbol. But, there was, a couple of weeks ago, we went through 1st and 2nd Samuel, just like straight through. And it was like half an hour a day of listening to, and all that the king did, or maybe it was the 2nd Kings, all that this king did is written in the book of the kings in the history. And yeah, it's incredibly boring. But at the same time, it's like, this is the Word. This is what God has recorded for us to have of what he says and what he thinks is important. So yeah, lest you think that I'm listening through it front to back, I would never recommend anyone to do that unless your goal is to fail at reading the Bible in a year.
And I would 100% agree. We've tried multiple times. We even bought like the chronological Bible.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So it doesn't necessarily go Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, right? Obviously, that's the greater order of things, but even that was hard. Mm-hmm. Then you get into the lineages.
Right.
And then trying to pronounce all those names. Come on. But one of my goals, though, is absolutely to read it front to back at some point. And this is kind of a personal thing, is when my dad was sick, he read the entire Bible front to back in 6 months.
Oh my.
And then we got to sit down.
It's like probably like what, 40 minutes, 50 minutes or so a day? So I think you can read the whole thing if you do 20 minutes a day, you can read the entire Bible in a year. I think something like that.
Yeah. And I remember him saying, oh yeah, I'm in Revelation. I like, wait, did you read? He's like, oh yeah. And then he finished it and he goes, all right, Derek, I want to talk to you about some of this stuff. And so that was a cool moment for he and I to be able to talk through some of those things and kind of pick his brain about why he related to certain people in the Bible and what they went through. So yeah, anyways, one of my goals is cool. to be able to not match what my dad did, but be able to say, I've also done that.
So when I think about, for me, the biggest challenge, I have friends in my life that tell me I'm one of the most disciplined people they know. And, that's nice, whatever. It's just kind of who I am. But the struggle for a disciplined person, which, if you're not disciplined, this might sound weird to you, or if you are, you can relate to this, right? That a real disciplined person struggles sometimes to feel the motivation, to feel the heart, to feel the desire. So I told you beforehand, I'm reading this book right now called Overcoming Apathy. In the middle of the night, while Judah is eating, I'm feeding him. And I don't know if I would say I have apathy, but I would definitely say sometimes I do feel apathetic. And it's in those moments, what I don't say to myself is, come on, Jared, feel the desire. Usually I tell myself, you need to suck it up and do it. You just need to do this. Like, it doesn't matter what your motivation is. It doesn't matter if you want to. You need to do this. And in some ways, is that good? Sure, it means I get the things that I need to do done. But I also am emotionally intelligent enough to know that that's not a sustainable or a healthy way to engage with it. So I said when I was describing my day, like the idea of on good days and I try. And as disciplined as I am, I fail too. And a lot of times that's driven by the lack of feeling behind that. And going back even to, your question, like it's probably because the cup hasn't been poured enough, hasn't been filled enough. But I'm also one who believes, which is probably just a disciplined person coping, that there are seasons of life when discipleship is awesome and feels like you're on the top of a mountain and everything is wonderful and comes so easily and so naturally. But then there are also times when it doesn't. And what are you going to do in those moments? And for me, I just trudge on because I'm hopeful of a future day when it'll feel good again. And so again, disciplined person trying to cope. I think that's helpful because it keeps me in the practice, right? It keeps me if you want to use that language of like a rut in my brain, it keeps that rut there and it keeps it going so that then someday, it'll feel good again. But there is a sense in which I do need to check myself too, that Jesus, we are not saved by our works. And I would even say so much that Jesus does not call us to do things just to do things. I think there is a way in which, again, disciplined person trying to cope, you can do things just because Jesus says to do them. That's probably a good thing to start with.
Yep.
But that you think about the guy in the church in Revelation, what does Jesus do for someone who is lukewarm or apathetic? He spits them out of his mouth. Oh, okay. I don't really want that to happen to me. And so when I think about my struggle, it's that I put discipline on too high of a pedestal or my routine too high, and I'm stuck doing without praying and asking for the Holy Spirit change part, without praying for the sort of help this form me as someone who's following you, help this change me. And it's a really hard thing to overcome because you can't, just like I always tell people, you can't force yourself to feel one way. You can only respond to how you're feeling. And feelings come and feelings go. And so in those moments when I'm not into it, if you will, it's hard to just, say to myself, enjoy this, like this, feel this. It doesn't usually work. Just like if you tell some anxious person, stop being anxious. Yep. How many times does that work? 0. But yet we do it all the time because that's just kind of how we think. So when I think about that, that's the way in which I struggle. Can you relate to that? Is there any questions
absolutely.
about that?
Well, as you're describing it, the one word that I kept thinking about was fear. But that's not
say more. What do you mean?
So it's not the bad fear, but it's we should fear and love God above all things.
Right.
Right. It is, but at the same time, it is kind of a fear if I'm not doing these things. If I am lukewarm, that puts me at jeopardy, right?
Sure.
Type of mentality. And so I would say that I've always kind of operated out of that fear also.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about my vocation in Lutheran education, kind of going back a couple episodes here, it's like, what else would I do? Like, I feel called to do ministry because of because of my relationship with Jesus, I guess you could say. And if I know that my salvation and my eternity is important to me and important to Jesus, then others are too. And yes, we can talk about Jesus in every vocation, right? But it's like, I'm called to do ministry in this way because of my past, because of my relationship with Jesus, and I want to help others know him because I don't want people to be lukewarm either. It goes back to that fear.
And I think that fear that's a very different word in the sense of how we're using it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we're talking about a sin in some ways. So like for me, it's I'm fearful to not be doing the right things.
Mm-hmm.
And well, what is that then rooted in? Well, that's in a self-justification by works,
yep.
Right? That somehow I'm a good disciple because I'm doing, not because I'm believing. And well, shame on us, how much do we often revert back to those sort of old ways of thinking? I think I want to lead us to close in this way. What are you wondering about, or what new sort of thing are you thinking about? If there was a discipleship practice that you would like to explore more, what is something that you are interested in today that maybe you don't do, but you're curious about?
One thing that I've been doing that I've kind of fallen off of it a bit is learning Hebrew, right, for the better understanding of the text.
Sure.
Now, modern Hebrew is different than biblical Hebrew for sure, but just having kind of a baseline knowledge. And that's one thing that I get like excited about something for a little while, and then it's like, well, now it becomes like, right? And I'm always looking for the next thing. So I don't know, like Hebrew has always been kind of something that I've wanted to learn. So I've been trying to get back into that, but then it's, spending 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, whatever. Again, there's other things that are more enjoyable.
Sure.
So as far as like other things that I would like to do, this is one. I think this podcast has been something new that has been spiritually filling because we can just sit here and talk. Going back to the first episode, I think it's a way that you and I can pour into each other while trying to pour into others too. And these conversations, yes, we can have at any point in time, but it's a scheduled time for us to sit down and talk about things. So I think this is exciting. And I think that there's a lot of good things going on here right now and good things coming. So I don't know if I have anything specifically though. How about you?
That's good. It's good. I wasn't necessarily mining for anything particular. So I think I would say a similar thing I need to do that I haven't been doing. So for the longest time, every day, let's see if it's still in here. So every day after I read my Bible, I have this sheet of paper with a bunch of different I statements on it. And so I got this idea from Craig Rochelle, pastor of Life Church, leadership podcast guy. And every morning he begins his day with these sort of affirmation statements about who he is. And this goes back to what we sort of already talked about. How you see yourself, how you see the world matters, how you see who you are in the eyes of God changes the way you live. And your identity as a baptized, beloved child of God is the most important thing you could have in your life. And it changes everything. So what I do, or what I've done, is I've written down some things that are particular to me that I need to remind myself of. So, for example, my third one is I live to please the Creator. He is the one who defines my worth and value. I think all of us are people pleasers in some way or another, even if you say you're not. But as a leader who is meant to speak good news, but also hard news, I need to remind myself that my value and my worth doesn't come from the people around me or the good sermon pastor at the end of a Sunday or a Saturday night, that it's about what Jesus says about that. Another good one here, I think, I am content with all that the Father has given me and do not lust after more than I need, because God will always provide. I love new gadgets. I love new toys, all of those sort of things. And so I tell myself every day, you have enough. God will provide, not just in the sense of God will give you new gadgets, but it's hey, Emily stays home. I'm the sole income earner in our house. And so what does that mean? I need to trust that God will provide, all of those sort of things. So there's a few other two statements there. But for me, I think I need to get back into saying those and get back into doing. I mean, there was a time when I had them all memorized and I could just, before all else, I'm a child of God, baptized, beloved, and saved by Jesus. Stuff like that. And then it becomes so part of who you are. Yes, is it just that discipline thing? Sure. Some days do you just say it because, yes, but some days it's a great reminder of what I need to hear from what I'm about to go into in the start of my day, or what might happen that I don't even know about too. So that I think is where I will seek. So we'll let you know next week as we record if I've made any meaningful progress. Any closing words when we think about individual discipleship?
Just find a way to be in relationship with Jesus and find something that works for you, right? Lean on others around you that can help you in your walk with Christ. And I don't think that there's one right thing to do. I think that you need to be able to find what works for you and then embrace it and just dive in, and then find that routine and that peace and comfort with that. Find a place to start. Baby steps before you run, type of thing.
So I would say to you, you need to answer the why first. And so you need to realize, Derek is looking for that peace and comfort. I'm trying to find structure and routine. It's in some ways, it's not as simple as saying, well, I want to be a disciple. I want to do things because I know I'm supposed to do them. Well, what do you want them to do for you? How do you want them to fill your cup? Because we all need different things. We all have those things that we sort of seek out in other places and other things that aren't Jesus. And so what do you want it to do for you? And once you figure that out, then it's, well, how and what practices can I do that will help me get there? And I think then it becomes a lot more easy and clear. And your motivation, your reason for being then is a little bit more stronger maybe than just this year I want to pray 10 minutes a day. Well, why? Why do you want to pray? Well, because my life is absolutely crazy and insane, and I need something that's going to ground me every day. And so I'm going to pray for 10 minutes at, whether it's in the morning, I set an alarm on my phone at noon, whatever it is, this is what I'm going to do it. So I would encourage you to think about your why as you think about your discipleship. So next week, we will talk about family discipleship. And by that, we will talk just both the nuclear sense of, hey, what does it mean to disciple as a family? But we cannot ignore the fact that we are a family of faith as well. And so what does it mean to be disciple and to disciple each other as followers of Jesus? I think there's some really exciting things we can dive into there, but we are glad that you have been with us. As somebody says, sharing is caring. So if you found this helpful, please don't just like and subscribe, but share it with someone. Ultimately, what we want is for those people to see, to know, to love, and to believe in Jesus, that this might be a small part and a small portion of what God is doing in somebody else's life. So thanks for joining us on the Desert Well this week. We'll see you next week.
Take care.